I can't remember the last time I was this excited for a movie. Between the cast, the director, the premise, hell, even the color palette. Every day this movie drew closer to debuting, I got more and more excited. Clip by clip, interview by interview. I loved Lady Bird, I loved Little Women, Ryan Gosling is one of my all-time favorite actors, and Margot Robbie just seemed like the perfect casting for this character, while also being a fantastic actress in her own right. This movie's little rivalry with Oppenheimer made the entire world just pay a little bit more attention, and being so invested in this movie already, I really felt a sense of being a part of something topical and special, and I went into this movie with perhaps too high of expectations. I sat in the theater eager in anticipation, wondering, would it live up to the hype? Or would it sputter and suffer because of its aggressively anti-man, pro-women themes, like some were saying it did? Maybe it was just my little corner of the web, but it did seem like a lot of people were watching this movie and agreeing it was far too woke, far too anti-man, boo the patriarchy, and any fun that could be had by the cast or premise was being heavily overshadowed by a trite and eye-rolling narrative. And then I actually watched the movie. And although for the most part I simply watched it through the lens of trying to get as much enjoyment out of it as possible, it's impossible for me to not overanalyze something as I watch it, and these complaints other people had sat firmly in the front of my brain as I did it. Was Barbie anti-man after all? No, it's just pro-women, and frankly it's mostly just pro-human being. It's just a lot more out in the open with its themes and positivity regarding women. And they are the main star of this movie after all. Wrapped from head to toe in the neatest and cutest package you've ever seen in your life, this pastel and star-studded movie contained far deeper themes than I was expecting. And it never shied away from taking the movie and its audience along for a pretty sad and heartfelt ride. Throughout this entire movie, we're gently beaten over the head with the concept of life's struggles. The idyllic nature in Barbie Land is lost quickly during the first act and is replaced with things like the fear of death, jealousy, disappointment, and life's lack of purpose. Presented almost entirely through Barbie herself, none of these concepts are unique to women and are obviously felt by everyone. Something this movie acknowledges incredibly often, pivoting between viewpoints of Barbie and Ken. When initially given the choice between knowledge or blissful ignorance, Barbie begs for ignorance. After being subjected to only a few of life's common gripes, she wants no part in it and simply wants her own little ball of perfection back no matter the cost. But unfortunately for her, that isn't really an option, and she has to venture into the real world to reconcile things. Gloria playing with her and her daughter's old Barbie doll and inflicting unintended doom upon Barbie Land is not only a neat plot element, but a beautiful representation of what nostalgia can really manifest as. At least for me, I've always found nostalgia to be a bit of a hollow sensation. If I rediscover an old video game, I'm only filled with that familiar sense of glee for a few fleeting moments. It doesn't take long for me to realize I don't really miss the game, but rather my life back when I used to play it. Stress-free, responsibility-free, living a life of true ignorant bliss, I'm instead now reminded of all those feelings and how different my life feels in the present. My responsibilities become larger, my stress feels more prevalent, and that hollowness deepens as I realize the thing I thought would help me is only making things worse. And Gloria feels all of this too while playing with her and Sasha's old dolls, only her greatest sorrow is brought forth by the memories she used to have playing with them with her daughter. It's the same concept, however, longing for a moment in time that will never be lived again, no matter how badly you want it to. That's a concept and feeling shared by people of all genders, and although the real delving into men's issues doesn't become more out in the open until the third act, I think it's clear to see how so many of this movie's struggles are represented through women, but are not exclusive to them. An imperfect example of this being the scene on the bench where Barbie calls the old lady beautiful. Having grown up without society's general disdain for the old and feeble, Barbie looks into the eyes of someone who is almost certainly the very first elderly person she's ever seen, and she's blinded by none of what society would consider ugly or unappealing. Instead, she just sees the wisdom, the courage, the calmness, and the beauty that comes with her age. Imperfect because this is a sensation most strongly associated with women, as society views the aging of women far more harshly than that of men. But the feeling of growing older, feeling weaker, less capable, less important, that is unique to no one, and this brief scene encapsulates that very nicely. At the end of this movie, there isn't a single demographic of people put down or made to feel small because of this movie's message. With the exception of some jokes here and there that almost exclusively land extremely well, it has never truly suggested that one sex is inferior or superior, and it has never hinted at that men and women should be treated differently. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, a quick little overview of this movie to explain how these messages manage to be delivered in such an engaging and enjoyable way. Some movies make you feel downright miserable as they get their important and impactful themes and motifs across, and this is not one of those movies. First of all, the performances are out of this world good. Ryan Gosling and Margot Robbie both give exceptional performances capable of stacking up against any of their previous movies, impressive in Robbie's case and incredibly impressive in Gosling's case, but arguably just as marvelous are the slew of side characters who deliver extremely consistent laughs and tug at your emotions in all the right ways. Although I truly do not think a single person turned in a lackluster performance, I can see why so many people think Simu Liu faltered a little bit. When compared to the other Kens, he just seems a lot more reserved, and since his role is a touch more prominent than the non-Gosling one, I think at times he does stand out just by virtue of not being particularly excellent. But oh my god, from Weird Barbie Kate McKinnon, Alan Michael Cera, to Mattel CEO Will Ferrell and Gloria America Ferrera, these side characters do not miss, and they're responsible for oh so many of this movie's best moments. Will Ferrell and Michael Cera bring a consistency in their charm and laughs, and they never fail to make a scene their own. Gloria was a sleeper hit for this movie's best character, and Kate McKinnon plays a surprisingly major role in the narrative while being incredibly charming and funny in her own right. I really cannot overstate how good I think the humor was here. No joke shoved in at the wrong time, no cringy one-liners, no pauses as if waiting for an audience to clap or cheer. Every single time a joke was made, I smiled or grinned a little, and so many times I actually proper laughed or had a smile come across my face that would make my grandmother blush. The fact that Mattel agreed to allow this type of movie to exist, and not only that, but allowed themselves to actively play a major role within the film? Greta Gerwig, how did you do it? It feels a bit like Star Wars with Family Guy. If there's a mutual level of trust, there's a lot of fun and charm that can be had that benefits both people, even if a lot of the time someone's taking shots at the other. You can tell when a company is being played with in a friendly way versus when the creator genuinely loathes what they're making fun of. Regardless, after nailing Lady Bird and Little Women, it only seemed natural that she'd excel with this project as well, but it is still immaculate to witness. I could go on and on about what I liked about this movie, and I even began writing the script under a different title geared more towards how this movie truly is one of the more made-for-everyone movies, just like Margot Robbie promised us, and I really do think it nailed that incredibly tricky balance of being for, at least most people. Nothing's for everyone. Sometimes when you make everyone kind of like it, you don't make anyone really love it either, but that is not the case here, because I absolutely love it, and I know a lot of other people do too. This movie's broad appeal aside, there were times beforehand, throughout, and even afterwards where I did sit with myself and really decide on where I felt this movie stood in regards to its essentially men versus women slant. For much of this movie, it is the women, the Barbies, versus the men, the Kens. During this, we are presented with the women as being the good guys, the ones we're rooting for to reclaim their former glory and shove the Kens back into second place where they belong. Robbie and the Barbies are demoted, replaced by the Kens displaying textbook toxic masculinity and offering frighteningly little in the way of something to cheer for or support. They are clearly framed during this part as the antagonists, namely Gosling's Ken. And certainly at times this movie's characters do treat the men of Barbie Land as if they are beneath them, but the movie itself does not agree or support this notion. The Kens' foray into toxic masculinity after a life of something resembling servitude highlights a few things. How living for other people is not remotely good for anyone in any way, shape, or form, how searching for an identity outside of other people is vital for your own mental health, and then a bit about how power corrupts, and a bit about how easy it is to radicalize someone after they've spent so long feeling rejected and marginalized. This movie largely focuses on women's struggles with insecurities and society's expectations of women, but it touches on the same issues for men as well, albeit to a smaller degree. This movie is pro-women. That's its main objective, which is perfectly fine and done to a masterful degree. The argument here is not that that isn't the case, but rather in service of that goal, did they in turn diminish the men? Well, of course my answer is no. The movie ends with Ken being apologized to by Barbie, and being told there is so much value in Ken outside of his relationship with Barbie. As he voices his frustrations, he says it's always Barbie and Ken, never just Ken. And even though Ken doesn't have a host of unrelated hobbies or passions to pursue outside of her, where he could say, you know, I have always wanted to be an astronaut or something, she still tells him that that's okay, that simply being Ken and working to find himself is far more than just okay. Even Barbie admits she doesn't quite know what she wants out of life before becoming a real girl, and the movie ending with her going to the gyno instead of getting a girl boss corporate job like the movie kind of makes you think she will, reinforces that. Something beautiful in this scene that I haven't really seen enough people talking about is how Barbie gently and kindly tells Ken all of this, while remaining firm that she does not have feelings for him. It's sweet in a way, her being honest and truthful even if it hurts him, and it goes against the classic trope of girls discovering the nice guy they've been ignoring all along is perfect for them. That trope can be okay, but it's overdone and it also paints the wrong picture for people of both sexes. Sometimes being nice isn't enough, and for guys they need to learn that that's okay. To like someone, treat them well, and still not have their feelings be reciprocated. And for girls it shows them that they don't owe anyone anything. Sorry, I cannot stop talking about how well this movie treats women. It just really does. But back on track. Before this ending, we get the now very famous Ken song. Aside from containing the funniest goddamn transition I've ever seen in movie history, this song sums up a lot about Ken's psyche and what it's like to forget who you are in pursuit of something greater, which this movie acknowledges is largely Ken's fault, but Barbie plays a role as well, as she never either made time for Ken or set him straight that she wasn't interested. She kinda just kept him vaguely in limbo. The war between the Kens is ignited in what could be described as a bit of a sexist way, as the Barbies play on the Kens' jealousy and desire to be the most desirable, but it's funny and largely true, so it's fine. While fighting during the Ken song, they come to the realization that they're not really fighting each other, but fighting against themselves. Raging a war against their own insecurities and fears, the brief sense of camaraderie and brotherhood they felt while ruling Barbie Land is expanded on in a much healthier way, as the war shifts into more of a choreographed dance number. Gosling and Liu dancing with one another and not against each other. The beach off gets really wholesome, you guys. Gosling returns from the real world with a new sense of what his life could be worth. After acquiescing for God knows how long into a life of playing second fiddle to the women, the brief taste of the concept of the patriarchy essentially corrupts Gosling into thinking if they were capable of ruling us, why can't we rule them? We can be just as cool, just as smart, just as powerful. If it works in the real world, why couldn't it work here? There are not nearly enough horses in this place, and mini fridges are practical. Of course, mini fridges are in fact quite impractical, and so is the men simply ruling the women, as this movie suggests that the Barbies ruling the Kens also wasn't ideal. ideal. The men in the real world seem to say they only created the patriarchy, as the movie depicts it, to escape from the horrors of reality, acknowledging that the men of the world face hardship on a non-stop basis just by nature of existing, and working towards a shared common goal of essentially oppressing women is a nice way to quell the demons. The same type of message ushered by Gloria in her wonderful speech, only in less exuberant fashion, because that's mainly what this movie is about, as I've said about 1,000 times now, women's issues, which garner a much deeper and more introspective reflection. Gloria's speech is so beautiful even I got a bit misty, and my girlfriend wept so hard she refilled my 2-liter twice over, and it was all true and, funnily enough, worded in such a perfectly specific way as to elicit positive and impactful feelings from the audience, not bitterness or resentment like statements such as hers can often evoke. This again reinforces her words that women have to do things in such a perfectly perfect way to get desired results, because being too mean is being a bitch, being too nice is being weak, wanting a family is boring, wanting a career is selfish, etc, etc. Almost all of my examples of how the men are treated well here have something to do with the women being treated well as well. But one way in which this is not the case is the fact that only one person gets an entire song dedicated to them. Is that because Ryan Gosling was the only person alive capable of pulling off such a historic feat? Well, maybe. But I also think it acted as a chance for this movie to take a slight pause and focus solely on the men of the story and what this entire situation is like from their vantage point, since maybe they weren't being heard from quite enough. Corrupted quickly and easily by the patriarchy because of a lack of an identity, they turn towards the very essence of toxic masculinity by becoming something of a hyperbolized alpha male. Ken is shown throughout to be somewhat sad and almost pitiable while obsessing over Barbie, but here, while deciding he is enough and coming to the realization that longing for Barbie isn't all he's good for, he's celebrated. Thrust into the limelight with loud music, background dancers, and costume changes, Ken is finally the star because he's coming to believe he is actually good enough to be one, just by being himself, just by being Ken. I've spent a lot of time speaking about how powerful and well-worded the themes and messages in this movie are in regards to women, but I hope I've made it clear why never for a moment did I, as a man, feel as though I was being put down in order for the women to stand tall. Rather that this moment, or most moments from this movie, simply weren't about me. They were about her, or her, or her. Ken is Knuff all on his own, and after initially being denied a seat on the Senate, the narrator chimes in to say that eventually the men in Barbie Land are given the same treatment as the women in the real world. To some people that meant still second fiddle by a long shot, but to me it meant maybe still second if they have to be ranked, but becoming more equal every single day while ignoring and disposing of old and outdated traditions and thought processes. Being a woman is hard. Being a man is hard. This movie is mostly about the former, but somehow it managed to speak on the latter in impactful and powerful ways all the same. All while being wrapped up in one of the most engaging movies I've ever seen, visuals, dialogue, and performance-wise. They're probably going to, but please don't make a sequel. Just leave this one be. Thanks. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll consider leaving a like or a comment or subscribing to the channel for more stuff like this in the future. Thank you again. Until next time.